Good morning and welcome to the NBA Daily. It's trade deadline week, but guess what? Hey, they're still playing basketball games that count, so we're going to talk about those a little bit. We got Sam Amick to go inside the Luka Doncic to the Lakers trade, which shocked the world. And we got Jovan Buha to go inside the future of the Lakers, how they're going to build around Luka. Good morning, everybody. Good morning, S.
Good morning.
Quiet night in the NBA compared to the weekend.
Yeah.
Monday, it felt like a Wednesday, man.
Yeah, I'm numb to it now at this point. It's like, oh, yes, there's basketball that, you sometimes forget during the trade deadline that the reason people are doing all these trades is for the on-court product to be better, the basketball to get better. So there you go. Basketball still happening.
You almost think maybe they should just like take a break. Like it should be the All-Star break and trade deadline week.
Right. Yeah, like they do for soccer, a little window to just do everything. And then
Instead, Zach LaVine happens to have paternity leave just in time to be traded to the Sacramento Kings. We're going to talk about that with Sam in a little bit. We're going to get into the Luka trade because Sam has all the details on how that happened. But let's talk about the games a little bit. Let's talk about those Kings. The Kings got a big win. They beat the Timberwolves, who, man, they've had a shaky couple of days. They lost to the Wizards the other day, losing to the Kings, who are shorthanded because no De'Aaron Fox out there. But end of this game, I was just struck by how good it looked to have Malik Monk and DeMar DeRozan just handing the ball off, taking turns, and just absolutely crushing the Wolves defense, just waltzing into the paint. And I started, my head starts spinning. I'm thinking to myself,
about it.
The defense is going to be awful, but they're going to have three guys that can go out there and get a bucket. Yeah. They're going to be tough.
And I think to LaVine's credit, he really can be the off-ball guy there, space the floor, be a weapon off of the catch.
At three-point shooting.
Incredible as a three-point shooter and having a really, really good season this year, too. So you think of like him and Keegan Murray on the wings with Monk and DeMar facilitating, making plays. And then you also have Sabonis with the high post playmaking. Like all of that can come together to be a really good offensive team. And you think about like what this Kings team was when they made their run, becoming the 3 seed. They were a historic offense. So you might be able to get back to something along the lines of that. And they're not going to be historic, but they'll be pretty damn good offensively. It is the defensive side of the ball that I have questions about. And so you're putting a lot of pressure on Keon Ellis and the rookie Carter to kind of get things going at the point of attack. We'll see how that goes. But yes, this was a good win for them with no Fox in the lineup.
Yeah, we're also hearing they could be in play for one of these centers that's available, right? So maybe they find a guy like, maybe it's Jonas Valanciunas, although, there's a lot of teams interested in him, but maybe they find a guy out there that can at least help shore that up and play next to Sabonis. The Knicks came back to beat the Rockets, who just cannot hang on to a fourth quarter lead. Third game in a row with no Alperen Sengun, and it really showed it. But again, they're a team, they're not going to do anything at the deadline. They want to see what this team can do. And we know that they can blow fourth quarter leads, but it's tough. Look, the Knicks have Jalen Brunson, 42 points from him. And, that's tough.
And honestly, they didn't like the Rockets didn't have any answers defensively for Jalen Brunson in the fourth quarter. Like he was just carving them up. And, I think it was so far this season, it's been about the offensive woes for the Rockets and how they're going to kind of execute fourth quarter wise. They were missing Fred VanVleet in this one too. So missing that kind of like grenade, we need a shot desperately type of guy. But ultimately, I think this is actually more about the Knicks and how good they look recently and how great Jalen Brunson has looked recently. I mean, he's quietly having just as good of a season as he did last year, where he finished fifth in MVP voting. And so when you look at that, like maybe they're a team that can quietly add around the margins at the trade deadline. Maybe. I know there's been rumors about Mitchell Robinson. Like, he's been cleared to play basketball and back at practice. We'll see how he looks. We'll see how they want to incorporate him, or maybe they decide to trade him and make an upgrade at some point. But
a lot of teams looking for a guy who can space the floor vertically like that and defend the rim. I should mention Jalen Brunson, also 10 assists, doing a little bit more playmaking this year. And then Amen Thompson had a triple-double, 25 points, 11 rebounds, 11 assists. And also almost fell and then turned it into one of the most athletic things that you've ever seen an NBA guy do.
Yeah, dropped Precious Achiuwa, and then Precious somehow stood back up in time for men to dunk on him.
Yeah.
It's incredible.
Find the highlight. It's definitely worth watching. Trae Young hit a big game winner in his first game back in a little while. The Hawks needed him because it's just fallen off a cliff for them. Jalen Johnson obviously now out for the year. I don't know. I don't like the step over. Yes, he did it. He hit Malik Monk with the step over. It's disrespectful. Yeah, he did. In a way that's not quite like I don't mind shooting dice at midcourt, but no, stepping over the guy. No, we don't want to do that.
So did you not like it when Allen Iverson did it to Ty Lue?
Different story. Virginia, we stay together on that. And the Grizzlies, look, they beat the Spurs. Zach Edey had a great game and threw an alley-oop to Jake LaRavia off the backboard. That was a fantastic pass in this game. But the Grizzlies now, with the Rockets loss, their win over the Spurs, they've got a 1-game lead. They're now officially the 2 seed. They've been fantastic. Jaren Jackson was Western Conference Player of the Month.
Incredible.
And had 31 points, 6 rebounds, 3 blocks in this game.
Yeah, no, Jaren's been their best player this entire season. And for them to get to the 2 seed is really important, given that like if they were to make it to the second round, they're facing the Rockets. They might be facing that new look Lakers team with Luka and LeBron. And so getting home court advantage in Memphis would be huge for the Grizzlies. And also one thing to note is like the Grizzlies are clearly going to be active at the trade deadline. They're going to do something. And so having that cushion of saying we're the 2 seed, we can figure things out by adding someone and also giving ourselves a better chance moving forward for the rest of the season. Maybe it entices them to be a little bit more aggressive.
Yeah, have some time to build up some chemistry too if they get it now. Yeah. But luckily, their rookie has just been so good, Jalen Wells. I mean, I don't even know. You can't cut into his minutes, so you got to figure out where do you add a guy.
True.
Guys, we got Sam Amick now to go inside the Luka Doncic trade. I still haven't wrapped my head around this.
We won't be able to. Yeah.
And I were not the only people to have our weekend just disrupted by Luka Doncic and the Mavericks and the Lakers. Our NBA insider, Sam Amick, I'm assuming, had a action-packed weekend himself. Sam, welcome back to the show. What's happening?
Hey, not much. Just here from the old Intel dungeon that I haven't left much over the weekend. I will say I'm so thrilled to be with you and didn't get into a car accident when the Luka trade happened. I might have been driving back from a personal event and notification pops up and the car might have veered off the road a little bit.
Oh my God. Yeah.
I mean, okay, let's go there.
By the way, Intel Dungeon and Haynes brief. Just think about that.
Oh, we got a little. Let's get some Chris Haynes for some cross branding. Okay, let's go. Let's go to the trade.
I'm uncomfortable right now. But go ahead.
Let's go to the Luka trade because it's shocking. I mean, I've found myself at a loss for words, confused. I think is what I could say. A lot of the folks that do this for a living kind of feel right now. So, Sam, how did this happen?
I love, by the way, how you put that because it feels like everybody's in sports therapy mode.
Denial.
Talk about your feelings. How did this happen? I mean, on the Dallas side, I admittedly continue to try to learn as much as possible about the motivations and the relationships and the dynamics and why this happened. It is Nico Harrison, the Mavs GM, who is the driving force behind this deal. It is, to call it, not to be crude, but ballsy is just an understatement. It is an incredibly bold move that could be wrong. I think, most likely is not going to age well. I personally believe that Luka, the tricky part here, guys, is that I understand some of the concerns. And I don't mean I agree with them, but I acknowledge some of the concerns that the Mavs clearly had about the way Luka handles himself as a professional. Mm-hmm. A little bit of shades of, and this is a little bit of there's a little bit of dishing of dirt happening right now, obviously, but like Joel Embiid comparison where it's like concerns about body, concerns about health, concerns about work ethic,
right?
Habits, you even hear, I mean, it's kind of out there. I mean, Luka likes to have a good time and party. And so that's, that stuff. Okay, I get it. But here's the tricky part. The way you went about trading him and choosing to deal with the Lakers. And as we've reported, and this is 100% true, even though Nico kind of acted like it wasn't true, they talked to at least one other team. That absolutely happened. But you did not tell the rest of the league that Luka was on the market, and you sent him to the Lakers. And so not only did you put him on basketball's biggest stage, but you put a chip on his shoulder the size of Crypto.com Arena, because you are broadcasting to the basketball world that you think that this guy has already reached his peak. That's, to me, the message that he is not equipped to make the most of his talent. If I'm him, that's what I'm hearing. That's what I'm feeling. When I get in the gym, that's what I'm thinking. When I get with JJ Redick and LeBron, and honestly, for as much as I have spent several years, a lot of my career, at times analyzing and critiquing the Lakers in some of the way they function, right? Their culture. The one thing we always sleep on is what that stage, what that franchise means to players.
Right.
Like, trust me, when I just went down there last week, right? And I know I'm kind of commandeering the conversation here, but
commandeer,
please continue.
Yeah, please. Yeah.
I went down there last week, and it had probably been 2 months since it might have been my first Lakers game this year in LA. And for all the years I've done this, because my home courts are Kings and Warriors, and they're fine. You go do your work at those arenas. I went down to the Lakers game, and it never ceases to amaze me as I sit on press row, how my brain kind of looks around and goes, whoo-wee, like this place is different. Like the celebrities, the spotlight, the glitz, the glamour, that stuff, for a dude like Luka, who, by the way, every road trip that they would have in LA, this should tell you a lot. Luka it was the only time that he would do his media immediately after the game in his jersey.
Right.
Well, that is not his habit, right? He typically takes like an hour to talk to the reporters.
Like usual stars do, right?
Yes. Yeah. Well, guys, why is he doing that? Well, because it's LA and he's got plans and he wants to go have a good time. So, all of which is to say that, man, I can intellectually understand how Nico looked at this and said, man, AD, who, I have a relationship with, from the past, Rob Pelinka, who is my guy from the Kobe days. Rob, lifelong Kobe agent. Nico was Kobe's Nike rep. I first met Nico in the halls of Staples Center every single night after games, waiting for Kobe. That was Kobe's guy. So there's a synergy in that relationship. So AD, Kyrie, Clay, the rest of that group, whoever they're going to get, they're a good team right now. It's just the idea that, the whole basketball world was dying to see what the next 15 years look like for Luka. Yeah. And now that's in a different jersey.
I said this on the show yesterday, and I want to run this by you, because I think that the biggest thing, the shock, is just this breaks the norms of how NBA front offices have sort of set themselves up, right? It's all about getting the generational star, getting the one guy you can build around. And then every single move you make is to increase the floor, raise the ceiling, and all of the things around this one guy. And we just saw this team say no to a guy who is regarded universally as a top 5 player in the NBA.
After doing it for years, going all in.
Wins a title.
Right? Yeah.
I mean, are we seeing just a sea change here overall?
In terms of this possibly being a trend?
Yeah, where teams are telling stars no.
I don't think so. No.
Okay.
Who else comes to mind?
Well, Jimmy Butler
is the
Karl Anthony Towns getting moved for financial reasons, right? Where it's not just, hey, this guy's under contract, he's a star, we just eat this money. Now the financial parts of it are coming into play a little bit. In my opinion, the new CBA is kind of bringing this to head.
Yeah, I mean, you could counter that by saying, you look at the De'Aaron Fox situation in Sacramento. Right. My understanding is they were ready to pay him, and it wasn't going to be the Supermax because he wasn't going to qualify. Right. But that still is him choosing to be elsewhere. Right. I get your point. I think there's merit to it for sure. To me, I mean, yes, the idea. What's the final number on Luka? What he had waiting for him?
It's like 345 or something, something along those lines.
It's just massive. And I get that. But by the way, if it goes well with AD, they're going to be giving the same amount of money to AD, who is routinely sidelined by injury. Folks don't question his conditioning or his work ethic to the degree that they do Luka,
right?
But they do question his toughness and things of that nature. So, it feels partly like, yes, finances always play a part, but call it culture or personality. I think personality is a key word here. Like Nico, Jason Kidd, Kyrie, Luka. One of those things is not like the other. Like the last guy is a bit of call him a rebel, call him a lone wolf. It's not that. I mean, he seemed to connect with Kyrie, and this is me. I'm a little torn on this topic.
Yeah,
the Kyrie component I think has not been talked about that much, and at minimum, I think it's fair to highlight that you had a synergy between Nico and Kyrie that was born out of the risk that Nico took to trade for Kyrie in the first place. The relationship, again, we go back to relationships. Nico had the relationship with Kyrie from Nike, and that led to that deal. Right. Kyrie and AD have talked about playing together in the past. If you remember, it blew up when AD was in New Orleans.
Boston,
he was going to go to Boston, and they thought they had him. And then AD's dad publicly talked about how he wasn't going to sign in Boston. But that was actually about the city. That was really the way that they treated Isaiah Thomas. Was what motivated AD's dad to say, we don't want to be there. But history between Kyrie and AD. And so as you look at that landscape, I'm just going to keep it surface level here for the most part, but you look at Luka and he's not really part of that fabric. So the Mavericks have, more kind of consistency with that fabric right now. They just don't have the guy who it was MVP caliber for the next 5 years.
Yeah.
It's funny to compare and contrast this to the Fox deal, which we briefly just touched on, because it is a guy who is asking to be on a different team and now is on a different team, which is the San Antonio Spurs. That 3-team deal went down last night. And to see that go down the way that it did, Sam, you see the Kings get the return that they got. Were you at all surprised to see the return that Sacramento got here, whether from a positive perspective or a negative, up to you, but were you surprised to see what they got in return for De'Aaron Fox?
No, I mean, a little, and I'm peeking on my phone so I can have the pieces in front of me. I mean, a little peek behind the curtain. The night before the trade went down, I had hit up some folks about how I was hearing that Zach might wind up in Sac in this deal. So that part of it, ultimately happens. And on that aspect, I will say, in the here and the now, I think Zach's officially become an underrated player. There's metrics. I mean, you can look at the metrics and and I know a lot of folks don't want to hear that word, but the analytics and say there's a discussion to be had that, he's having a better year than De'Aaron. And De'Aaron's having a pretty good year. So the LaVine part, and the fact that his contract is not nearly as toxic now as it was a couple of years ago because the cap continues to spike.
Right.
That part I get. The pick return is a little bit deceiving because you start with the 2025 first from Charlotte. That's going to be 2 seconds because it's protected 14. The 2027 Spurs first is literally unless you just think De'Aaron's going to forget how to play basketball.
Bet against Wemby.
Exactly.
Yeah. That's going to be a late first. The 2031 first is really good, but that just feels like a lifetime away.
Yeah.
But that's a really, really good asset, and then you got a bunch of seconds, it's going to probably wind up being 5 seconds if that first turns into 2 seconds.
Right.
The bigger thing, if I was Joe Blow Kings fan, is the return was okay. Especially, I mean, somebody joked they should send flowers to Nico Harrison because after the Luka AD trade, the Fox trade looks fine.
Right.
But the problem, I think, now in terms of their planning is that, you got a front office in Monty McNair, Wes Wilcox, that I do think are facing, some peril in terms of their job security. And you have a retool. It's not a rebuild. It's a retool, and it's trying to remain competitive, which I'm sure is at the behest of owner Vivek Ranadive.
Yeah.
So in the here and now, it's kind of mildly interesting. DeRozan, LaVine, Sabonis, Monk at the point. Devin Carter is interesting. He's finally playing. Their rookie, Keegan Murray, in that lineup too. But where's it all going? Mm-hmm. Because the runway suddenly seems pretty short. Yeah. Zach's going to be there a couple of years. DeMar, I've been told, is not going to get moved before the deadline. But how's DeMar feeling about this? He came to play with De'Aaron Fox. How's Sabonis feeling about this?
How's Malik Monk, who college with De'Aaron, right? And the whole connection.
Yeah. Although I will say, Malik's one of those dudes. He got paid. He got paid.
And he had the ball in his hands too, probably.
He got paid and promoted. That's
right. Yeah.
I think Malik's fine. I just think can't universally speak for everybody around the team, but there's a strong sense that there's a decline in faith in the organization's kind of strategy and soundness, if you will, that could mean that a bunch of these pieces are kind of quietly looking off in the distance, going, okay, this is probably not a long-term deal. Where am I going to go next?
Yeah, I was saying last night that we have to hold off, I think, with the Kings and see what they do the rest of the week, because I don't know if they're done. Mm-hmm. Let's talk about the Spurs side of this. I mean, they get De'Aaron Fox, right? They get the best player in the trade. I think, not knowing Luka was available, probably the best guy that was on the trade market when you think about the future of your team. Pair him with Wemby. This makes obvious sense. I think my question is, Sam, why the rush? Why jump into it now?
So the biggest thing that is, again, by myself and others, probably a little underreported, is the contract mechanics that played a part here. By getting traded now, De'Aaron can now extend with the Spurs in July. I believe it's in July. Mm-hmm. It's 6 months from the trade.
Right. Right.
If it waited until the summertime, he's got to wait until January. Now, I don't know. I don't know if that moves the needle for you guys, because it's all right, but if you know you're going to do it eventually, what's the rush? Right. I think, why do it now? And that was probably the number two reason. Number one reason would probably be because the level of urgency on the Kings side and the level of uncomfortableness within their locker room was such that you would obviously have to fear them going somewhere else with him. Mm-hmm. Now, yes, there are reports that, Clutch told other teams, represents Fox, that they told other teams to stay away and pursue him at their own peril. But, if you're the Spurs and you think you do have the type of partnership that you want with Fox and Wemby and your organization, then that's a tough risk, because, the Kings needed to move on. They did. The Kings had significant pressure from De'Aaron's teammates to make something happen right now. So I think that played a part.
Yeah. What about the Bulls' perspective in all this? Because I think, they're now all done for the most part, still waiting to see what happens with Nikola Vucevic. But if you look at the return in bulk that they have from Alex Caruso, DeMar DeRozan, and Zach LaVine, they basically just got their own first round pick back in 2025, Josh Giddey, and then a bunch of salary and filler, if you will. Where do they go from here? Because
what are they doing, Sam?
What are they doing is the better question to ask here.
Yeah, it's not great. I mean, it's funny because, I wrote a month ago, I wrote, what are they doing? They got to do something. And, and this is part of the danger of our jobs is sometimes you're hypocritical in media. We're going to say, what are they doing on the front end? Because they're not doing anything. And then we're going to say, what are they doing on the back end?
Right.
Because they didn't do enough. But it's not enough. It's not a lot. And listen, it's a results-based business, right? So I'm not going to really have any guilt saying this. When we earlier in the season did a story ranking all the front offices in the league, we focused on asking every single team and their people, who's your top five? Well, the funny side benefit of that story is that it cracked me up how many people wanted to share their bottom five. And it was like, well, no, that's not the story. You can't unhear these things. And so along the way, I'm just giving context for like the way their colleagues see their performance the last couple of years, and it's the front office with Arturas Karnisovas and Mark Eversley, who long tenured execs who know what they're doing and they're smart guys. But right now the reactions to their choices are just wildly negative across the league, where Chicago would just come up time and again with people, throwing them in their bottom five. So it's not just media slander. It's real stuff within the industry.
The Sacramento Kings just turned themselves into the Chicago Bulls. It's kind of fascinating to watch. LaVine and DeMar DeRozan being reunited
today.
This week is we've gotten off to a hot start. All right. What do you have in your notebook? Like, is there a name that no one is saying out loud that you're hearing maybe? And I'm throwing this at you. I'm throwing a fastball right down the middle for you that you weren't expecting. But
I'm going to lean into that, baby, and just take my base.
Is there a name that like we're just not hearing that will surprise us?
No, this is not as spicy, but it's spicy, but it's already out there. But I will say, it was already on my radar before it was out there. Jake Fisher, who's now over at Substack, had put something out today and did a nice job with it, talking about the Warriors and their pursuit of kind of every star, but Jimmy Butler and a gentleman named Kevin Durant. The Durant, there's a lot happening there right now. And I do think it could be a very interesting couple of days where the Suns desperately want Jimmy, but then there's this kind of question of, if they don't get him, what's the mood like? If there's another trade deadline that not comes and goes, but if the guys in the room say, "Oh, geez, are we really still rocking with this crew?" What are the possible dominoes there? And the Warriors are very aggressively trying to find somebody to put next to Steph. So I would love to. This would be unethical. I would never do this, but if I could hack into Mike Dunleavy's cell phone records and see how many calls he's put into Milwaukee, how many calls he's, I think reaching for the stars, pun intended, is what they're doing. So, don't be surprised if we hear, I don't know what'll get done.
Yeah.
But if we hear kind of more
being aggressive.
Look, man, Saturday night proved to me anything is possible now.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Anybody
whatever jersey swap you have. Yeah.
That's it. Anything can happen. Sam Amick, hopefully, will let me know before it does this time. So I'm not as surprised. Go and read him over at The Athletic. He is the man for all of the reporting at the trade deadlines. Go and check that out. Guys, stick around after the break. We're going to talk to Jovan Buha with the Lakers side of all this fallout. Our guest today is a busy guy this weekend. He covers the Lakers for us over at The Athletic. Jovan Buha, welcome back to the NBA Daily. We scheduled this, Thursday last week? We were like, we'll do a Monday check-in. Certainly the Lakers won't do anything crazy by then. How did this just lands in their lap? They get Luka Doncic for Anthony Davis and a 2029 first-round pick. And we've gone through the behind the scenes, how we got there. Jovan, your job really right now, I think, is thinking ahead and looking at the future for the LA Lakers, right? Like they have their star that's going to carry them past the LeBron years, theoretically. So what happens next?
Well, I think the first and foremost, they have to get a better starting center than Jackson Hayes. So I think that's going to be the key thing to monitor here ahead of the February 6th trade deadline, because we'll get into the on-court dynamics with Luka and LeBron, but ultimately looking at the current roster as it is composed, they already needed a backup center upgrade. Then they traded Anthony Davis, their starting center, and the only player on this roster that could protect the rim and was a good defensive rebounder. So I look at rim protection and defensive rebounding and just defense in general as a bit of a concern for this group. So I think ideally they add a better starting caliber center and they add another perimeter defender, more so like a backcourt guy, but maybe a guy who can guard like 2s and 3s, similar to what Max Christie provided for them. So I think those are two on-court needs that they have moving forward over the next few days. They have a first-round pick they could trade. They have a few pick swaps, 1 second-round pick, and then still some optionality with like a Dalton Connect or some of the mid-sized salary that they have. So we'll see what they can pull off. I've been told to temper expectations that it's likely going to be a small move if they do make a move here over the next few days. But at the same time, that was the intel I was getting before the Luka trade. So it feels like anything is possible here over the next 3 days.
It might have been a small move if you're the Lakers, man. Yeah. I mean, at least it's a no-brainer.
Yeah, no. So I think that's like the thing I'm interested in, just because I think how we view this team on the court, it's like, I don't think they can win a championship with Jackson Hayes as their starting center. If you go get a Jakob Poeltl, a Robert Williams. Those aren't like the sexiest names and the biggest needle movers, but those types of guys at least are a significant upgrade over Hayes. And I think it makes you a more serious team. When looking at the rest of the group, it's like Luka, LeBron, Austin Reeves, Dorian Finney-Smith, Rui Hachimura, though he potentially has to be moved in a trade like this for a center, Jared Vanderbilt, Gabe Vincent. Like there are some pieces there that you could kind of talk yourself into the Lakers top 7 or 8 if they can add a center. So I think that's the big thing. But then obviously getting into the Luka LeBron fit and how both of these guys have always been the Batman in this situation where they kind of share the spotlight with a star. With LeBron in Miami, in Cleveland, in LA, he's always been the primary guy. It's always been the stars adjusting to him. With Luka in Dallas, with Kyrie, it was Kyrie adjusting to him. So I'm fascinated to just see how those two make the basketball fit work. I think they're both smart enough and skilled enough and just talented enough to figure it out. But it is going to be an adjustment to both of them, where I think it's the first time in their careers they can look at the guy opposite them and say, like, this guy can kind of do everything I can do. And you can make the argument that like they should have the ball more. So that's really like a first, I think, for both of these guys. And I'm fascinated to see how that ends up kind of playing out on the floor.
From covering LeBron over this stretch and seeing how he approaches team building and like getting chemistry going with his teammates and whatnot, how do you think he feels emotionally about the transfer between Anthony Davis to now Luka Doncic, and like where his mindset is at compared to what it was a week ago?
Yeah, well, I heard his first reaction was feeling for AD and just the shocking nature of AD being traded. Because again, as we've talked about before on here, and as I've reported, like the initial thinking going into the deadline for the Lakers was they were going to be adding a center, maybe another wing, maybe a backup scoring guard, something like that, to kind of fill out the rotation. Like they had just won in New York without AD. They had won 8 of 10. They've slowly been rising up the West standings, and this came as a shock to everyone. And this was a situation where Rich Paul, LeBron, AD were all kept in the dark because of the fear of those guys potentially standing in the way or leaking something to prevent the deal from happening. So they were all completely left in the dark until finding out after the Knicks Lakers game, when we all found out basically. Right. And so I think the first reaction from LeBron was just concern about how AD was going to respond. And but as I've been told and as others have reported, AD took it relatively well, and I think is embracing this new opportunity in Dallas. So I think after that, it became excitement about playing with Luka Doncic. And this is a guy who his rookie introductory press conference talks about LeBron glowingly. He's referred to him as his idol before. I think there's obvious comparisons similarities on the court to those two, and just how they play the game, how they process the game. So I think this is actually for all the criticism and flack that Luka has drawn in the last couple of days from the Dallas side. I think like he's going to have a vendetta right now. I think specifically toward Dallas, but I'm sure the league at large, but also you're setting him up with a player who can show him how to take care of his body and how to be a leader and how to kind of get over that hump. Because LeBron had a similar start to his career where the stats were there. He got got to the finals, conference finals, couldn't quite get over the hump till he got to Miami. And I wonder if this is kind of Luka's version of that, of teaming up with LeBron. And even if it's only a year and a half, kind of learning from him and not really propelling him to the next level deeper into his career.
Well, let's talk about some of that criticism. On the way out, the Mavericks essentially have let it be known that they're not a huge fan of his work ethic. I mean, we've talked about this on this show. I've talked about this for years. His body is just not what you expect of a professional athlete. I don't think he approaches it. And I don't think anyone can argue any different. Mm-hmm. We've already heard that part of why the Lakers were able to get him for such a seemingly small package is because they also played at those same concerns. I mean, So, what's the expectation here outside of, hey, he's going to go spend time around LeBron. He's going to be extra motivated now that he's with the Lakers. But I mean, realistically, like, that's not going to stop him from getting this max, the 5-year super max. Well, his now super max. It's not going to stop that contract from coming. So what do those concerns even mean if there's no carrot at the end of the stick, right? Like that he's chasing. He's going to get what he wants. So why should anyone expect it to be different?
I don't think they should necessarily. Like, I think we'll get a better idea when we hear from Luka tomorrow at the intro press conference Tuesday morning, 9 a.m. Pacific time. So that'll be the first. Like, he had a public statement and thanked Dallas and said how excited he is to be joining Lakers. We saw the little clip of him arriving in LA, throwing up the LA hand sign, but. I mean, to your point, like that's certainly a factor. I would still point to like this dude just led a team to the finals and was putting up.
He's still a killer 5 times.
He's still a killer.
I feel like to me, and I don't want to like completely dismiss some of the criticism. I think it's fair, and some of the weight stuff in particular about him approaching 270 or whatever. Like I totally think that is valid criticism. To me, this has all kind of felt like almost a smear campaign from Dallas getting out ahead and trying to set the narrative of they knew they were going to get so much backlash for this trade that they proactively were like, okay, we're going to leak and kind of share all this stuff about all of our concerns to try to justify it. Even with that, I mean, just look at the reaction online and look at the Mavericks fans' reaction, and like, I would say at least 9 out of 10 people think this was a complete fleece, a one-way deal that the Lakers won handedly. So Dallas can kind of float and say whatever they want. But, I posed it to some Lakers people, and the reaction I got was like, Luka's the second or third best player in the league? Yeah, we'll take that guy. So, it was just like, even whatever flaws or limitations or potential problems he has off the court, it's like, dude's still a walking, basically 39-9 guy. Just led a team to the finals. We're going to bet on that guy longer term. And we think it'll work out. I feel like the Dallas the narrative has almost been like, he's fallen off as a player. He's averaging like 18, 6 and 5. They missed the playoffs. Like, it's like, no, this dude is still putting up incredible numbers. They were 4th in the West when he got injured around Christmas time. They've since been under 500, been slipping in the West standings. Like, I think there's pretty much proof that like Luka's still at worst a top 5 guy.
We still felt like S and I still felt like they had a chance. They might be the best team in the West. Like with Luka, if everyone's healthy, we still felt like they had a finals run in them this year. I agree. I'm with you.
I think the Mavs narrative is something you brought up, which is 100% true of what they're trying to push. But the other aspect is like the Mavs over the last 4 or 5 years had pivoted so well to build the right type of team around Luka. It was a finals team. And it was a lob threat with Derek Lively, the backup big of Daniel Gafford. You had wings. You had a secondary scorer in Kyrie Irving. That blueprint is now there for the Los Angeles Lakers to try and replicate moving forward. And I'm curious to get your thoughts on, from a team building perspective, how confident do you think you are that Rob Pelinka and the rest of the Lakers front office can sort of build out a team with the aggression level required when you have a star like Luka Doncic?
It's a good question. I think, again, as I said a little bit earlier, like I think for this week, expectations should probably be a little tempered, and that to me potentially puts a bit of a ceiling on what they can accomplish this postseason. I still think most teams are not going to want to face Luka Doncic and LeBron James in a playoff series in the first round. Like that is and the Lakers have recently, like JJ's a big fan of playing small ball, centerless basketball. And they have looked a lot better with those types of lineups with Dorian Finney-Smith and Jared Vanderbilt on the floor. So I do think that there's potentially a scenario where we get to April and the Lakers are kind of starting Jackson Hayes as a placeholder, or maybe they get like a smaller, like a Day'Ron Sharp or kind of still another backup level big who's maybe a little bit better than Jackson. And ultimately they're like crunch time lineups are some combination of like Vando, DFS, LeBron, Luka, and Austin. And you got 4 guys who are like 6'7" to 6'9", and then Austin out there. And like, yes, defensively, there's certainly some holes in that lineup, but with DFS and Vando switching and providing a certain level of versatility defensively, I think you can maybe just get by as like average defensively and then elite offensively, figuring out the fit with Luka and LeBron. So I think that's kind of the short-term path. Longer term, of course, one that they're looking at a second star for the whatever LeBron retires, they want to add a second star to put around Luka.
It's always been that way.
It's always been that way. Right? And look, after this week, like it's hard to dispute that it's going to happen, right? Like the Lakers just stay Lakering. The Lakers exceptionalism is alive and well, and they will probably find that second star based on how NBA history has gone. I think to your point, like it is going to be interesting to see like how they build the roster specifically around Luka, because I think you could go back to the beginning of the LeBron AD era, and it was let's put defense and athletes and a bunch of high motor guys around LeBron and AD, and they progressively went away from that build throughout the rest of the LeBron AD era. So I wonder like if they ultimately build the ideal Luka team in the next 2 to 3 years, can they sustain it is its own question. And only time will tell with that. But my understanding is like they've switched from the LeBron timeline to the Luka timeline. And this is all about Luka moving forward. How can we build the best roster and the most sustainable roster around Luka? And that's why I think had they not traded AD, maybe you would have seen a more win now move this week to try and add a supporting role player. I think now it's more about like, we're not trying to add a mid 30s player who doesn't really fit with Luka's timeline. It's like, if we could add a younger center or something like that, that fits, let's go do that. If not, we're going to stand pat and hold those assets till the summer or next season.
Well, before we get you out of here, and I know you're so busy, give me a perfect name, okay? Outside of Luka Doncic, which is the most perfect name you could possibly pull for the Lakers to get. But like, what's a perfect name for them to land here in the next few days?
I think I've come around to Robert Williams. I do think in talking to the Lakers and the Portland side, I think there's a little bit of a gap there in terms of how they view him. I think the Lakers, it would probably ideally be like multiple second round picks, and maybe there's a way they could do a smaller trade to get back some seconds and do that for Robert Williams. Whereas from the Portland side, I think they want like an unprotected first for Robert Williams, which to me is a little bit too high, especially looking at the price of role players in this market has been 2 to 3 seconds. And I do like Robert Williams. I think the upside is clearly there. And like on a per minute, per possession basis, he remains one of the best rebounders and shot blockers and rim protectors in the league. The problem is he's averaging fewer than 6 points and 6 rebounds a game. He's playing 17 minutes a game, and he's never played 61 games or never played more than 61 games in a season. So like, there are some clear injury concerns with him, and he could be one more injury away from having his career drastically altered and potentially having just like a limitation there to just how much he could play, period. So I think for the Lakers, like that's probably a little bit too rich of a price. But someone like that, because he's a lob threat, he can protect the rim, and maybe you can still kind of play that small ball basketball, but have him be like a 20 to 24 minute a night starter.
That's exactly
and then the rest
what I was
of the
thinking.
Game, you go small.
And his ability to switch and trap and hold up on the perimeter, I think he'd be pretty good. And like him and LeBron would surprisingly give a lot of rim protection. I mean, LeBron is a backline help guy.
And Vando, right? Yeah, you have that combination.
Yeah, I like the Robert Williams move. Obviously, the Luka Doncic move. You know, I think I would grade that an A. for Rob Pelinka. Jovan Buha,
it's insane.
A+ student right there.
Can't believe it.
Man, I am so excited for you to be covering LeBron and Luka Doncic. Can't wait to read all the stories. Go and follow Jovan over at The Athletic and get all his work there. Thank you, Jovan, for hanging out. Thanks to Sam Amick. For Baraheni, I'm Dave DuFour, and this has been the NBA Daily. Thanks for waking up with us.